Existentialism is often imagined as a cold European phenomenon, born in smoke-filled Parisian cafes where intellectuals dressed in dark coats stared into empty cups of coffee, haunted by the finiteness of existence. A philosophy of gray streets, gray minds, and gray conclusions. But this image conceals a deeper, more violent origin. Existential anguish does not require silence in cafes. It is born wherever life reveals itself as unstable, fragile, and unjustifiable. And few places embodied this truth more brutally than Spain. Miguel de Unamuno was born in 1864 in Bilbao, in the Basque Country, a land already fractured by identity, loyalty, and blood. His childhood unfolded during a time of violent political conflict, where traditionalists and progressives clashed with a ferocity that left no room for innocence. The siege of Bilbao was not a distant historical event for him. It was an experience carved into his earliest memories. Cannons, fear, hunger, uncertainty. The realization that human life could be reduced to ideology and destroyed in the name of ideas. These early encounters with violence shaped him profoundly, not by turning him into a revolutionary, but by pushing him toward a deep rejection of violence as a political instrument. For Unamuno, violence did not solve contradictions. It only silenced them temporarily. He grew up surrounded by faith, tradition, and cultural continuity. Spain was still deeply Catholic, deeply symbolic, deeply rooted in the idea that life had a meaning bestowed from above. But Unamuno was not content with inherited truths. He carried within him a restless need to understand, not to accept. When he moved to Madrid to study philosophy and literature, this need turned into a crisis. The Ateneo de Madrid Library, known as a center of intellectual transgression, exposed him to works that questioned God, purpose, and metaphysical certainty. These books did not liberate him. They wounded him. What began as curiosity soon became torment. The God of his childhood no longer felt solid. But neither did atheism offer peace. He found himself suspended between belief and disbelief, unable to settle into either. This was not a theoretical problem. It was existential. If God did not exist, then death was final, meaning was illusion, and all human striving was a cruel joke. But if God did exist, then why doubt? Why silence? Why suffering? Faith no longer comforted him. Reason did not save him. He was trapped between them. After earning his doctorate, Unamuno returned to Bilbao and involved himself in political and intellectual life. He founded a socialist newspaper, openly aligning with leftist ideas, not because he believed ideology could redeem humanity, but because he believed human suffering demanded engagement. At the same time, he married and became the father of 10 children. This was not incidental. Fatherhood intensified his existential struggle. To love children while knowing they would die. To raise lives destined for annihilation. To teach hope in a world that offers no guarantees. For Unamuno, family did not resolve the question of meaning. It sharpened it. By the end of the 19th century, his spiritual crisis reached its breaking point. He came to believe that searching for an ultimate explanation of life was a futile endeavor. Philosophy could analyze. Theology could promise. Science could measure. None could console. His focus turned inward, toward the human soul itself, toward the contradiction between the desire for eternity and the certainty of death, toward the unbearable awareness that human consciousness is both a gift and a curse. Spain, meanwhile, continued to collapse into instability. Civil wars, dictatorships, ideological violence. When Unamuno became rector of the University of Salamanca, he stood at the center of a nation tearing itself apart. His outspoken views led to exile in the Canary Islands after criticizing the dictatorship of Primo de Rivera. Even exile did not silence him. After the regime fell, He returned and became a prominent voice of the Second Spanish Republic. Yet once again, hope turned to disillusionment. Politics revealed itself as another arena of contradiction, compromise, and moral failure. With the rise of Franco, Unamuno initially welcomed the uprising, fearing that radical progressivism would destroy Spain's cultural soul. But this support quickly collapsed under the weight of reality. The brutality, racism, and glorification of death within Franco's movement horrified him. His famous confrontation with General Milanestre crystallized everything Unamuno stood for. When the general shouted, "Long live death," Unamuno responded with words that still echo through history. "You will win, but you will not convince. To convince, you need what you lack, reason and justice." It was not a political statement. It was an existential indictment. Shortly after, Unamuno was placed under house arrest. He died weeks later, under unclear circumstances, suffocated by fumes from a brazier burning in his home. A quiet death, a tragic end. But his thought did not die. It intensified. Unamuno did not approach existentialism as an abstract philosophy. He lived it. He suffered it. He allowed it to consume him. For him, the central tragedy of human existence was not suffering itself, but consciousness. To be aware of one's mortality is to be condemned to anguish. Animals live and die without knowing it. Humans know they will die and must live anyway. Reason for Unamuno was a double-edged sword. It allowed humanity to build civilizations, understand nature, and dismantle superstition. But taken to its logical conclusion, reason leads to nihilism. It reveals that there is no objective meaning, no guaranteed purpose, no eternal foundation. Reason explains the world, but destroys the soul. Faith, on the other hand, does not explain anything. It contradicts reason. It defies evidence. But it offers something reason cannot: hope against annihilation. Yet Unamuno refused to choose between them. He rejected both rational certainty and blind faith. True faith, for him, was not comfort. It was torment. A belief without doubt was not faith at all. It was intellectual laziness. He famously wrote that those who believe in God without passion, without uncertainty, without despair, believe only in the idea of God, not in God himself. Faith must hurt. It must tremble. It must risk collapse. This is why Unamuno's work is filled with contradiction. He deliberately avoided systematic philosophy. He distrusted rigid structures, clear definitions, and neat conclusions. Life itself is contradictory. Any philosophy that eliminates contradiction falsifies existence. His novel Niebla exemplifies this rejection of convention. It dissolves the boundary between author and character, fiction and reality. Unamuno enters the narrative himself, arguing with his own creation. The character realizes he is fictional. The author admits his own power is limited. There is no resolution, only awareness. Unamuno even refused to call Niebla a novel. He invented the term nivola, a deliberate disruption of literary classification. Form itself became an existential statement. Structure was rhetoric. Disorder was honest. That poetry offered him another language. Not to explain, but to express. For Unamuno, language was not a tool for clarity, but for proximity to the ineffable. His poems do not resolve doubt. They intensify it. God, in his writing, is not a metaphysical entity. God is a wound, a longing, a question without answer. Central to all his thought is the desire for immortality. Not symbolic immortality through legacy or memory, but literal survival. The refusal to disappear. For Unamuno, this desire was not childish. It was the most human impulse of all. Philosophy often ridicules it. Science dismisses it. Religion institutionalizes it, but Unamuno insists that the hunger for immortality is the core of consciousness itself. Every human endeavor, he argued, is an attempt to resist death. Fame, children, nations, art, faith, all are strategies against annihilation. Reason exposes these strategies as futile. Faith sustains them anyway. This tension cannot be resolved. It must be lived. Unamuno's existentialism is tragic because it accepts defeat in advance. Humanity fights against nothingness knowing it will lose. But the fight itself gives meaning. Belief without proof. Hope without guarantee. Love without permanence. This is not optimism. It is defiance. Unamuno did not offer solutions. He offered a mirror. His philosophy does not tell us how to live. It asks whether we dare to live at all. In a world obsessed with certainty, productivity, and control, his thought remains deeply unsettling. He refuses to anesthetize anguish. He refuses to promise salvation. He refuses to reduce life to formulas. To live, for Unamuno, is to exist in permanent contradiction. To love life while knowing it will be taken away. To search for meaning while suspecting none exists. To believe while doubting. To hope while understanding the absurdity of hope. This is not weakness. It is courage. Modern culture seeks to eliminate discomfort. It offers distractions, identities, ideologies, and narratives designed to suppress existential anxiety. Unamuno exposes this as escapism. Life does not become meaningful by avoiding death. It becomes meaningful by confronting it. He understood that absolute truth might not exist. But he also understood that the experience of being alive is undeniable. The fact that we are here, conscious, questioning, fearing, hoping, is itself extraordinary. To be surprised by one's own existence is already a form of meaning. Perhaps we do not need final answers. Perhaps we do not need certainty. Perhaps meaning does not reside in conclusions, but in the intensity with which we engage the question. Unamuno invites us to abandon the illusion of resolution and embrace the drama of being human. In the end, existentialism in Spain was never about cafes or coats. It was about blood, faith, death, and defiance. Miguel de Unamuno stands not as a guide, but as a witness. A witness to the fact that even in a world that explains nothing, life can still be felt, suffered, loved, and affirmed. And maybe that is enough.